Tremaine Wright to join us. Welcome.
Thank you.
So Tremaine has been nominated by the governor to be the chair of the board of the Cannabis Control Board of the new Cannabis OCM, Office of Cannabis Management. You think I would know that? It was my bill. Not good at initials. Some of us know Tremaine from her time in the assembly. Some of us don't know her at all. Our usual request is that you give us a little introduction about yourself and why you think this is a good job for you as nominated by the governor.
Thank you. Well, welcome. Thank you for having me today, Madam Chair, Governor, the leader. And my name is Tremaine Wright. I'm going to try to speak a little bit louder, I'm sorry. I'm Tremaine Wright. I'm a former Assembly member. I'm currently serving as the statewide director for the Office of Financial Inclusion and Equity. I am very delighted to be here today to sit before you and to present myself as a candidate to serve in the Office of Cannabis Management. This is a wonderful opportunity for our state. This is one of those moments where we're all coming together and we have an opportunity to create an entire industry from the bottom up, which will provide access as well as means to people throughout this state and give them a way to participate in an industry which has the potential to be a tremendous economic engine here in our state. As I said, I was a former Assembly member, but before that, I am a trained lawyer. I started off doing private placements, securities, and IPOs. So I understand what happens in large businesses, and that is exactly what we have that operates right now in our state with our marijuana businesses. Many of our medical marijuana businesses are already up operating. They're multi-million-dollar enterprises. What we need to understand, and we need someone that has a sensibility for, is someone that can understand that must exist, as well as the opportunity for those who have been harmed by the manner in which cannabis and marijuana laws have played out in our communities. And I believe that I offered that to this position, or I bring that with me to this position. Because in addition to being a trained lawyer, I also sat on a local community planning board for over 14 years, and I operated a small coffee shop in a neighborhood on what many of us would consider the main street. I interacted with the regulators, the municipal regulators, to understand what is it that small business people have to deal with every single day. Who do they hire? How do they help to transform and energize a neighborhood? This is what cannabis is for our communities. In every single community throughout this state, cannabis has the potential to be a driver for communities to create opportunities, to create the outcomes, and to shape the manner in which they want cannabis to play out in their community. That's what we need. We need to have someone at the table who's ready to have vision. I offer the example of a coffee shop that was opened on a block that had nothing but illicit activity. A corner store that also housed some drugs, gambling spot, and I think they had a used furniture store. Now it is a thriving commercial strip. It is a reformed and transformed main street. And it was all about being able to identify vision, to navigate what existed in our space, to take advantage of opportunity. And that's what we're going to be doing through the Office of Cannabis Management. We are going to be using this skeleton to build a system, to build opportunities, and to support the people of our state so that they can participate. We know that cannabis has been tried in other states. We all know that we can identify examples of mistakes that have happened in each rollout. This is our opportunity to get it right, but we will only do it if we utilize all of the tools that are available to us. And I think that what I'm bringing to you today as a ready, willing servant in this capacity is the willingness and the ability to bring those things together and to vision what a better tomorrow and opportunity is for us. As we're stepping forward from this moment, we want to prioritize as a state getting this program up and running, making sure that there is accessibility, making sure that we have strong, healthy conversations in our public discourse, an education system that is robust, that addresses the concerns related to youth use, that's also related to how we make sure that our, we have a, I want to say, a more prioritized use of the cannabis plant in our general discourse amongst the people who are using it for medical as well as those who are using it for recreation. So we have an opportunity here. We want to be accountable. We want to make sure that we reach these goals, and I believe that that's what I'm here today to present.
Thank you. I'm going to open up for questions. Anyone? Oh, I'm sorry. Hello. Senator Burrow.
Thank you. Someone, thank you for being here today. And just have a couple of concerns. You know, I've spoken to a lot of folks in my district about the vacuum of information that we have right now, unfortunately. And there are con artists right now. They're telling people that I need $20,000 so I can apply for a license. And people that are leasing space because I have a guarantee that I'm going to get a license for a dispensary. So right now there's a huge vacuum of information that is being filled with con artists and misinformation and just a lack of, I think, guidance. So you mentioned that you're going to promulgate some rules. I have a lot of concern for the fact that New York State, as far as I know, is the only state that did not restrict the public consumption of marijuana anywhere. In your opinion, do you feel it would be appropriate for us to, as we do with alcohol and other controlled substances, restrict where and when people can consume?
At this moment, we're about to create the rules and regulations. The municipalities also do have a hand in determining the when, where, how consumption happens in the locale. We are partners in that effort to make sure that it is a system, it is a program that supports the consumption and also the participation that municipalities want, and that also supports our communities at large. Cannabis is legal throughout the state. We want to make sure that we are addressing the needs of communities and making sure that communities are a partner in that conversation. But that's only going to happen once we start to get this up and running, that we get it staffed, and that we start to actually promulgate some regulations. We don't have them in place at this moment. So I am very concerned when I hear that people are dedicating $20,000 and that they're paying consultants. We see the very same scams going on in the liquor applications, and we need to be able to get ahead of that. The first thing we have to do is begin to engage the community and do outreach so that we can let them know exactly what we are planning and how they can engage legally in this process, and that they will not be taken advantage of.
And I appreciate that. I will say, though, unlike liquor, as someone who holds several liquor licenses, we don't allow convicted felons to have liquor licenses in New York State, but we will with cannabis. So I have a great concern for an all-cash business that already has a huge black market that is going to give licenses to convicted felons. How are we going to control? How are we going to ensure that these folks aren't dealing under the table out the back door, since they have a history as convicted drug felons, and of doing that for probably years before? So I have a lot of concern, because there is no comparison between a liquor license and a cannabis license. A liquor license has to go to somebody with a tremendous background check. Everybody that's involved has to have a background check. You have to know where the money's coming from. You have to know if that person has ever had a felony conviction, and a felony conviction will essentially disqualify you from ever having a liquor license. How are you going to control the fact that none of that, under the current statute, is in place?
So the criteria that we have in place are designed so that we can make sure that we have good actors in the space, and we're also setting up parameters so that we can make sure that when people are renewing their licenses, that we can also look back and make sure that they are good actors, that they are living up to the expectations of the communities in which they are operating. We know that there are people who do wrong in all business ventures, And one of the things that is in our bill and that we will also be reinforcing as we roll out regulations is that these people must not have been involved in fraud, which we find that that type of criminal activity is something that we really want to make sure stays outside the scope and outside of our licensing parameters, and that we are not bringing those people into this. We do understand that people who may have been charged with marijuana possessions will be eligible for licenses under these regulations, and we do not ever want to have a system where those people who have been harmed by our legislation are being shut out of the system. We are very deliberate that our social equity brings people into this system, brings them into this program, and that they have an opportunity to participate in a legal manner. And that's part of what the legalization of cannabis will do for our state. It is going to find a way for people to participate within the system in our organized program. That is what we are setting up supports for. That's what social equity programming is for. And that is what we want to make sure that our communities are properly engaged and educated about, so that we can make sure that we have good actors on the ground.
With all due respect, the way that the law is written, the bad actors actually go to the front of the line for licensing. So that's going to be a big challenge. But you mentioned that you would not want to have anyone who has committed fraud to get a license. I believe that's what you said.
Yes, that's
right. So if someone has been
criteria.
convicted of, let's say, passing a bad check or using somebody else's credit card, has been convicted of that, whether it be a felony or a misdemeanor, would that, in your opinion, would that disqualify them from having a
No,
license?
those are listed as criteria. If we read the bill, it does not say that someone who has had, it does not say automatic recusal from getting licensing. It does say that we want to, I don't have it memorized. And as a lawyer, you always pull out the law. You don't do it from memory. But the idea is that we are trying to make sure that we bring in people who are going to abide by the rules and laws that we have put in place, and that they are not doing things that are deliberate financial crimes in the business. Because it is, like you said, a business that we are very, very concerned with setting up properly and making sure we put the right parameters around them to help support it.
Well, again, we're giving preference to those who in the past traditionally have broken the laws and the rules. So now we're expecting people to essentially follow the rules.
Are you referring to those who are going to have their records expunged?
Preferences. No, I'm talking about.
And those are people who have been arrested, and those people for whom we are now going to be vacating their convictions, and we will be also expunging their records, and that is already underway under OCA. They've already begun the process. We also have a number of VAs who are supporting that work. This is exactly the type of work, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because that is exactly the idea behind us legalizing cannabis in this state. We wanted to make sure that we found a way that we brought people back into our system, and that we brought people from the outskirts to the center. We want to make sure that people are not being pushed away, and that they have a way to participate fully in our society, because we do not want outcasts. We want to make sure that this is inclusive and that this has opportunity to grow holistically. Thank you.
And I'll finish with this last question. What you had said was we're going to expunge the records of those who have marijuana convictions, but not the ones who have convictions for other drug felonies, for fraud, for other criminal activities, whatever it might be. But those people will still be eligible for those licenses, and that's my concern.
I believe her answer was that those people won't be written off completely, that they still have the right to apply.
Yes.
I believe that Ms. Wright correctly clarified that as her agency develops regulations and criteria of who they prioritize for licenses, that in fact could, change the outcome of someone's request for a license. Do they meet the criteria that? And I think your questions are totally legitimate, but perhaps more a debate about what legislative changes we might want to make in the program at some point or not, once we get it up and running, as opposed to the regulatory and policy questions that the staff and board will actually have under their rubric.
Well, it's both. I guess guess you've got a big job ahead of you. I agree with you, Madam Chair, that I think you look at making some changes so that this is not a heavy lift for the Office of Cannabis Management, because it's really, as I said, it's a huge vacuum of information right now. It's being filled with fraud and misinformation, and you've got a big job ahead of you, and a lot hangs in the balance. The public safety of our citizens in New York State, and this business, which we expect to generate revenue, which in reality probably isn't going to generate that much revenue, since everybody can grow plants, they can have 5 pounds of marijuana in their possession. That's going to be a big challenge to actually generate revenue. So you've got a big job ahead, assuming that you are approved today. So I wish you.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman, why don't you join us up here?
Thank you, Senator.
Assemblywoman Kristen Jubal-Stokes, who was my co-sponsor of this bill, and I think feels very committed to us moving forward today in the Senate. I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut off other questioners, but do other people have their hands up on this side? Oh, hello. Okay. Tom O'Mara, I saw first, then Joe Griffo, and then I'll come over to the Democratic side, if that's okay with everyone.
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, Mr. Wright, for being with us today. Again, as similar to the last bill we took up, I take issue with the timing of this nomination before us today. To my understanding, we received the appointment handed up to the governor's office just before midnight last night. We've received a 1-page processing form and a 1.5-page resume, which is an impressive resume, Ms. Wright. As an attorney myself, you have some good, solid legal experience. However, a couple of questions on the process. When did you first become engaged in conversations with the executive on this nomination?
Yesterday.
Yesterday was the first time you talked to the executive.
Yes.
On the appointment processing form, most of these come through with the compensation identified on them. This one says chairperson shall receive an annual salary. You know what that salary is?
No, I do not.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Senator Griffo.
Senator Kruger, that would be a follow-up that I would ask you as chair, if you had that information, because recently we've seen a movement and trend within the executive branch to limit or remove salaries from various boards and authorities of the state of New York through reorganization. So do we know, will this board now receive compensation, all members of this board, and who will set that compensation in addition to the staff?
So only the chair of the board will receive a salary. The other board members are, I believe it's per diem, I want to say 300 per day. Somebody remember exactly? Okay. I'm sorry, Allison, what did you say?
I did not.
Oh, I almost thought somebody said something. So it's whatever the standard is for board members of per diems. I don't know if I can comment on the previous governor and how he liked to do things, because he's gone, but remember, we did negotiate this bill with the previous governor, not this governor. And it was written in that the salary for both the executive director, who will be interviewing next, and the chair of the board would be determined both through appropriation available within the budget for the authority and in negotiation or discussion with the governor. So as we can see, this is moving very quickly, since I didn't know Ms. Wright only had her chance to speak to the governor yesterday. But frankly, many of us have been urging the governor to move quickly. We were urging the previous governor to move more quickly, and he was not. And then we got a brand new governor. I think she was surprised also at the time frame, and she is working to move very quickly to fill a great many positions in state government. And speaking for myself, I'm very happy that she's recognized that there is so much work to be done in the cannabis world, and that we need to get moving, and she is moving very quickly. But I also asked and was told that there hasn't been discussion about salary for Ms. Wright or for the executive director nominee. I joked earlier with them, I was hoping it was more than $1, and perhaps enough for the mortgage payments that I know need to be paid, but we don't know. Okay. Senator Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin, you want to do that? You make letterhead like for another week or what?
Yes, I am. First of all, I just want to say that I've known Tremaine Wright for a very long time. She was an outstanding colleague as an assembly member. She also was the chair of the Black Puerto Rican Engagement Caucus, which I served the leadership team with her. She always showed good judgment, and I am very happy to see you here today. One of the things that I have been concerned about when it comes to cannabis writ large is making sure that it works in the state. We have all seen and heard of other states having a problem rolling this out in a way where the state makes revenue, where the sort of illegal market actually sort of shrinks and goes away, and we can have this be a well-regulated business. My question for you is, what lessons have you learned from other states that you want to apply here to ensure that we will have a successful learning program? And how do you see your leadership in making sure that happens with staff and board? Can you just talk about how you structurally are going to make sure that we actually do this right in New York?
Thank you for that question. I think that the primary responsibility at this moment will be to get this program up and running. And that means that we have got to develop a staff, a team of people who can come together and actually attack the challenges that are right here before us. We, in addition to building up our staff and having a talented team and supportive team, and one that knows and understands that each role is very important to the rollout and success of this program, we've also got to make sure that we are prepared for the transition that is occurring simultaneously with the build-out of the staff. We have both hemp and the medical marijuana program coming into OCM. Those exist already, one in DOH and the other in Ags and Markets. So we have to be able to work well with our partners and other agencies. So I think the primary thing is going to be building out our staff, making sure we have great working relationships, and so that those transitions happen seamlessly. Then we start outreach to community. Part of the problem of I'm going to say some of the challenges that we've seen and that have been identified in some of the previous questions is that our people don't have enough information. We've got to give them more information about what it is that is being established. How do they participate? How do they access? Then we've got to make sure that they understand and know all of the supportive educational information that's necessary for our state to continue and to be safe. We know that we have to have a strong public education program. Those things have got to be on the ground and happening while we are building out, while we are working through the transition, because an educated population is a better population for us. We have better businesses popping up. We have better users. We have better people participating and actually taking advantage of the programming opportunities. That's what we need to have. And so I think those are the priorities that will allow us to really roll out once we start to roll out the programs, we will have people who are ready to take advantage of them.
So real quick, so are there challenges that you've seen in other states that you want to make sure we don't do here, that because it just makes me nervous that like California, I'm not an expert on this, but I saw it was 60 Minutes that sort of showed some of the challenges there, and I guess I just want to make sure that we are from the beginning starting this in a way where we're not repeating mistakes that were made elsewhere. So I guess, how do you think about that? Are there things that you think we should definitely not do because it was done elsewhere, and these are things that are top of mind to concern about?
So I'm not going to say that we're working from a space of not what we should not do. We're definitely looking at where we want to go. And that when I say that we need to make sure that we are doing an education program, part of that is so that we can have people prepared and ready to take advantage so that we know what kind of licensing structures work for for people? What types of challenges will they face when they are trying to obtain leases, insurance, when they're working with municipalities and they're trying to make sure that they're submitted their sales tax? Because we have a banking challenge. So all of the education part helps us to attack a number of the issues that I think we've seen play out in other states. And I think that those are the types of, that those are exactly the challenges and issues that we've got to be prepared for. But we roll it out more easily and we help people come up with solutions that work for their particular business model if they are educated enough to ask the questions and to access the information. So that's what I'm saying. I don't want to work from where we're not going to go, more so about where we're headed. And it's definitely about an education program and making sure that the right people have access to the information.
Okay, thank you. Senator Savino was next on the list.
Thank you. So the first, Assemblywoman Wright, welcome. I had an extensive conversation with the governor's office yesterday, and you have tremendous skills. You're a very accomplished lawyer. You know the social equity industry well, and so this is not a reflection on you. But this industry, this industry is one that is incredibly complicated on so many levels. So some of the questions that the new lieutenant governor asked, I think are critically important. Rollout of this program is predicated on a lot of things. As you know, I was the architect of the Compassionate Care Act. I wrote the legislation under an incredibly hostile former governor. He fought me every step of the way. As he fought Senator Kruger and Assemblywoman People-Stokes as they drafted the language for this bill, the MRTA. He never wanted the program. I spent 7 years trying to improve the program. And in an industry that is legal in the four corners of your own state and illegal by the federal government, you face incredible obstacles. No state, from California to Kentucky to Connecticut, has rolled out a successful model, truly. Nobody has managed to reach the social equity milestones that they want. Every state has struggled with how to accomplish the challenges that this bill are going to have with how do we address the issues of not having big marijuana take over the industry, how do we get more entrepreneurs into it, how do we deal with the banking issues, the taxation issues, the whole bit. So I'm somewhat mystified as to why the governor decided to put in charge of the cannabis board a person who has no experience in cannabis. You have experience in a lot of things, but I'm concerned that you don't have direct experience in the cannabis industry itself. And so when I like what you're saying about your ideas. I do. But what I would love to hear is what you think you would do differently from other states. So when you said the answer to Senator Benjamin, that you wouldn't want to look at this from what we wouldn't do differently from other states, I disagree. So you're going to get an opportunity today. You're going to get it. And I'm prepared to work with you. I mean, I support the nomination. I feel very strongly about this. I really want this program to work because I put my heart and soul into the cannabis policy in the state. But I strongly suggest that the first thing you do after today is you and Chris Alexander and whoever else is on this board, you leave this state. The first place you go is you go to California. And you find out why their legal program had to be bailed out by the taxpayers to the tune of $100 million last month. Why Oregon has so many licenses that they tanked their own market. What's gone wrong in Colorado? On the way home, stop in Illinois and figure out why, in spite of everything they've done, they have failed to meet their social equity model. Go to Massachusetts. Go to New Jersey. Meet with everybody and say, what did you do right? What did you do wrong? Go to Las Vegas. See the largest dispensary in the country and see how they finally put together a social consumption cafe. Meet with the people that have done it right and done it wrong. And then the last stop you should make is Washington, D.C. And talk to those people and figure out what is wrong with them. We have 40 states with medical marijuana, 16 states and counting with adult use, and they will tell you that they can't vote to either legalize medical or they can't reschedule adult use. They can't pass the Banking Act. Unless and until we figure out how to deal with the banking and taxation issues, no social equity model is going to work. And we would be committing political malpractice to ask people, small entrepreneurs, MWBEs, to put in their life savings to only go bankrupt. So whatever happens today, I guarantee you're going to get nominated. I'm going to make a principled stand, and it's not about you. I'll take it personally. We've got to do this right, and the way we do this right is we figure out how to tackle the issues in Washington. And I think part of it also, and I'm prepared to work with you on this, we start to talk about things like interstate compacts. The idea that we would be growing marijuana in 50 states is absurd, Tremaine. It's absurd. We don't grow tobacco in 50 states. We don't make bourbon in 50 states. We should be able to buy and sell from other states. It would make more sense for us to ask Washington to give us that kind of permission. Create a real marketplace. Eliminate the regulatory hurdles. That's how we will achieve some of the things that we talked about. That's how we'll be successful, and we'll avoid those mistakes that were made in other states. So I just want to give you the benefit of my experience. I've spent a lot of time banging my head against the wall on this. I'm prepared to help you with it. I think you have a lot to learn. And you will see just how complicated this industry is, and why so many people fail, and why so many of them get bought up by big marijuana. It's not intentional. They have no choice. Until we address the structural issues in Washington, that's going to continue to happen. And I would hope that you would open your door to the medical guys. They have suffered long enough, and patients in this state have suffered far too long. I'm down with my soapbox.
Thank you. Senator Jamal Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Wright, for being here. I want to echo the sentiments of, well, one, I want to thank Senator Savino for her work in this space, and we greatly appreciate all the work that you've done. You've been someone who has shone a light on all of us in terms of what this space looks like. So I want to thank you for what you said. I want to allow myself and my comments before I come to Lieutenant Governor. I want to thank you for the work that you've done in terms of in the space of diversity and inclusion. You were my assembly sponsor on a bill that was first of its kind in the nation, the Crown, which was something that related to the discrimination, organic discrimination of individuals that chose to where they're here. Now, California may have signed it first, but our effective date was first. So you're no stranger to diversity and inclusion. And I think that also you were a Mel King fellow alongside me, and that was studying worker-owned businesses and worker cooperatives, and we studied ecosystems. And I think that when we're looking at cannabis legalization, we have to look at it as an ecosystem. And we have to look at it as Senator Savino's aptly put. Yes, it's the four corners of the document. It is effectively legal here, but it's a federally controlled state. So we start to figure out how do we make this an ecosystem. So to that point, I have two questions. How do you see worker ownership? Because, and again, in bothering Senator Kruger, the majority of People's Stokes was working cooperatives and making sure there was some sort of licensure in there. How do you see worker-owned businesses as being involved in the cannabis space? And also, to the point that Senator Brown made with certain individuals who may have found themselves running afoul of the law, those are the people that are precisely the people that we want to make sure are involved in diversity and inclusion. How would you look to get them involved in those areas?
So the law clearly states, the law that you all passed definitely clearly states we have a licensure for cooperative models. Therefore, that is a priority and that will be reflected in the regulations. We definitely want to set up a system where ownership, where I should say a communal ownership model is supported and also celebrated. Because I do think that's part of the challenge of cooperatives taking hold here in New York State. They consistently use the LLC model. We very often don't use the cooperative law at all. Even in this law, it makes reference to the LLC models. So I think that we definitely can utilize our technical services, which we will have available through the incubators that are also mandated in our bill. I'm sorry, in our law. We know that we are going to have a site in Buffalo and a site down in the New York City area, and I believe we're also going to do one here in Albany. We'll have an office here in Albany, so technical services will be here as well. We want to make sure that the technical services are there, because part of the modeling problem for cooperatives is that the partnership is not always held by people who have developed a good partnership agreement. And so it's really about us getting them the information where they can get assistance and then thereafter supporting it. So as we look in and we're talking about social equity, we have got to support models that allow more people to participate. I understand and I fully appreciate what Senator Savino is saying about banking and the issues that we're facing about commerce, interstate commerce, and the law definitely states we are supposed to engage with other states to have these conversations, those tough conversations that you just identified, and work towards solution. Even in the past 2 months, while I've been at Department of Financial Services in effort to support cannabis and knowing that we were going to grow the program regardless of who the governor was, we engaged with the state of Massachusetts banking department so that we can discuss how banking worked for cannabis, where loans were happening, where they weren't happening, and it's an extremely limited space in which loans are occurring. We know that, but we were also trying to identify challenges so that we can start thinking collectively about the solutions. And I do think that you have hit the nail on the head. It is going to be collective work, and it is going to be modeling across states so that we can figure out what is working and how we actually get people access to money. And that also includes when we develop and support collective modeling. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Thomas.
Thank you for being here. One of the critical components of the MRTA is about social and economic justice, like you said before, through business opportunities, but it's also about quality jobs. How do you intend to work with stakeholders in the labor movement in this process?
So the law clearly states that the owner of a business must be labor neutral. They must be in a labor, I'm going to say LPA. I know.
Labor peace.
Thank you. I was calling about an acronym. They must be in an LPA. And so I think that that is our first step. LPAs tend to be they tend to operate as being more union friendly than owner friendly, just because of the negotiation leverage that's available. And I think that we have to continuously support workers that want to organize themselves. That's part of technical assistance. That's part of helping people to understand what their rights are. Because understand what your rights are as a worker is part of this broader conversation. So same when we're talking about what an owner, what the results of being an owner are, we're also talking about what it is to be a worker and what it is to be a part owner, or what is it to have an investment in. And that's the language and that's the conversation that we have got to develop more amongst people generally. And I'm not trying to say it against for one or versus the other. This is really a financial health conversation for our state. People need to have a healthy relationship with money. People have to have a healthy relationship with investments. People have to have a healthy relationship with how they use their personal wealth. So this is a broad conversation, and this is just one of our tools in the toolbox to help us address it. We're talking about industry. We're talking about wealth building. We're talking about jobs. We're talking about your salary. And that's what I think that our technical and our incubator spaces are allowed to do. We're allowed to start to develop real financial health supports for our communities, and people will be able to make better decisions in all of these spaces.
So what is your plan to ensure that all applicants and licensees adhere to the requirement of the LPA?
So I believe that we have yet to write since we have yet to write the regulations, I'm imagining that it will be something that says, do you have an LPA? So that we can make it very clear. It's a yes or no answer. And I don't think that that would be our hugest challenge, to find out whether they're in existence. I think the larger challenge will be how do we continuously support workers that actually want to organize.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Skoufis.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. It's wonderful to see you, Assemblymember Wright, and thanks for putting yourself forward. And I agree with Senator Savino that clearly there is a great deal to learn. but having served with you in the Assembly and holding you in really the highest regard as a colleague, I have confidence that you are up to that task. I do have two questions. The first, and I know that the compensation has not been set, but are you able to commit your full time, your full energy, your full focus, given the learning curve, given the enormity of this undertaking, to this chair position? And second, given that we're already delayed in getting this system up and off the ground, in large part because we didn't receive a nomination 2, 3, 4 months ago, I'm curious as to what you foresee as the timeline to getting regs done and getting the product into society here in New York State to get to those questions.
So, yes, I am willing to fully commit. And I would say with regards to the timeline, we can't truly get regs out until we get a staff in place. And I'm going to say, if we were imagining a best case scenario, I could not imagine it happening quicker than 3 months. And that, I think, is even still on, that's a speeding through.
That's what you're talking about.
Yes, I think that's a speeding through. But I don't want to make an assumption that that's the timeline that we are going to commit to, because this is truly collaborative. We are all going to end up working together. And this agency has to work with other agencies, and we've got to work with the legislature. We're not able to do this by ourselves. And so if we think about it as a collective effort, I think that we will get through it much quicker, and we will be able to have the conversations about what is the necessary steps that need to happen in regulation, alongside what kind of legislation needs to happen to support it, and then what kind of budgeting decisions we need to be making. But we've got to approach this definitively as a collaborative effort.
And what do you foresee, though, as doors to retail shops opening? So 3 months, maybe best case regs. When does this become available?
I honestly, I would not, I don't think I can fairly give you a good estimate, because I don't think that there's enough, that we know enough yet to say.
Okay.
Because I think part of the challenge is also financing. So we've got a number of challenges.
Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anyone else with a hand up? I don't want to, no? Oh, great. Then, as is our custom, we thank you, we ask you to leave, and then we take our vote, which is on camera and in public anyway, but we still have this tradition that we follow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So it struck me as a little funny once we started to put everything online that we still do this, but we do it that way, so. All right. I don't know, do we actually ask for discussion on a nominee, or we just ask for votes?
I'll make a motion to move it.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Anyone wishing to second? Thank you. Thank you. I see quite a few. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Senator O'Mara. Are they all the Republican hands? Not Sue Serino. Oh, yes, also no? Okay, it's a party vote no.
Okay.
And Senator Savino has already said. Senator without rec, Senator Gustavo Rivera without rec. DWI. Sorry. I can't hear, I'm sorry. No, without rec. It's so hard with these masks. I apologize to everyone. I know, we're all mumbling four masks to each other. I believe we do have enough votes to move her to the floor. Is that correct, Allison? We do have enough votes. Okay, thank you all very much. We're next going to call in the governor's nominee for the Executive Director, State Office of the Cannabis Control, Christopher Alexander. And I'm actually surprised, like, who's he? But for the record, Chris Alexander was counsel to the Senate majority and even minority also for the quite a few years that I was working on this legislation. with Assemblywoman Crystal Peoples-Stokes. So I'm used to having a question about the bill and leaning over and asking Chris the answer. I won't do that today. I'll let him do his own questions and answers. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and why you think you are the right person for this job.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Chairwoman and members of the committee. I thank you for the time that you are giving today. I want to express at the outset my excitement about this opportunity and the work that we're about to do together. I know many of you, and I've stood in this room many times to answer your questions, to hear your concerns, but I'm also uniquely pleased to be here on this day in this capacity as the nominee to be the Executive Director of the Office of Cannabis Management. My name is Chris Alexander. I'm a native of Hollis, Queens, and the son of immigrant parents who came to the United States from the Caribbean island of Grenada. I've worked over the last several years leading the effort from a variety of perspectives to end marijuana prohibition in the state and to bring about the new regulated market and diverse industry that we have jump-started today. I built and led the statewide campaign to end prohibition as the policy coordinator of the Drug Policy Alliance, where we assembled a robust coalition of advocates, educated communities across the state, and pushed you all to consider what taxing and regulated cannabis could look like. It was in that role that I began drafting what would become the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, and eventually the Cannabis Law. I later came into government as counsel to this body, where I oversaw the Crime Victims, Crime and Corrections Committee, the Cities Committee, and for a time the Codes Committee as well. While here, I continued to serve as the lead drafter of the MRTA and spent time hearing the concerns of your community members and your constituents, and always tweaking the bill to ensure it was informed by the needs of this state and the lessons learned in others. I've spent the last year working for Village and its sister company Viola, which together make up the largest black-owned cannabis company in the world. In that role, I saw firsthand the challenges experienced by the entrepreneurs in this space, particularly those of color, who have limited access to capital, but are asked to navigate a jigsaw puzzle of laws and regulations with little to no assistance. And while I'm the person sitting in this chair, I cannot let the moment close without thanking the hundreds of people across the state and experts across the country who have worked intimately on this effort. I want to specifically say the names of Doug Green, of Empire State Normal, and Elizabeth Owens of local New York, two advocates who worked tirelessly on this effort but were never able to see this bill pass and this office launch. This has truly been a team effort. I'm incredibly proud of the work that we have done, and I'm honored that the governor and that you all have allowed me another opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Brown.
Thank you for being here also. I've got a few questions. You mentioned particularly the folks that will have a difficult time starting this business. This law was crafted to try and encourage small businesses, entrepreneurs, trying to keep big companies out of cannabis. As I'm sure you're aware, big liquor companies are in the cannabis business. I believe Coca-Cola is the biggest cannabis company in Canada, if I'm not mistaken. So big business gobbles these things up largely because you can't get a bank to finance a small business. So you're starting a position without knowing your salary, without knowing a budget, and without having any money to get entrepreneurs incubated. How is this going to work? How are we going to stop Coca-Cola and Canandaigua Wines and all these other companies that are already in the cannabis business from infiltrating New York State like they have everywhere else if we can't simply get an entrepreneur the money, the capital they need to start up?
I appreciate the question, Senator. I want to push back on one thing, and that the goal necessarily isn't to prevent big business from coming into the industry in New York, but definitely from allowing them to be the only operators in this space. And so we put in protections, including the limitation on vertical integration, the prohibition on certain entities having ownership interests in a variety of other businesses, to make sure that there's space and entry points. In terms of the support for entrepreneurs, the bill prescribes a myriad of supports that should be made available, including compliance assistance, counseling services, as well as the promise of capital. Now, we've still got to figure out where all that capital is coming from, but there is a commitment by the state to stand these businesses up and to make sure that they are generating revenue for the people of New York.
So you're saying that taxpayers are going to subsidize the incubation of the business is a way to counter the big businesses that have cash like Coca-Cola and Canada wines and all these others that are already in the cannabis business from coming in. So we're going to have the taxpayers subsidize that in order to keep big business at bay.
Well, I mean, the program itself is and as the law spells out, the program is designed to make sure that we're creating businesses that are going to last. And so there is going to be some investment by the state to make sure that those businesses can last. Some of that may come in the form of capital and other assistance. But the goal is, with these businesses generating the revenue back to the state, that those revenues are used, 40% of which to fund public education, 20% to fund drug abuse prevention and treatment programs, and additional 40% to reinvest in communities that have been ravaged by the war on drugs. And so I see it as an investment more so than a subsidy, but it is the promise of meaningful support that has not been provided in many places across the country, many of whom have failed specifically because of the lack of access to capital.
Well, all that's going to take to generate the revenue that's supposed to be generated by this business that we expect to generate. I think $350 million was the estimate. However, if you look at states like California, their first revenue, they projected over $600 million their first year. They came in at about $290 million. But New York State has an even bigger problem, the fact that we've allowed such a large amount of marijuana to be grown in people's homes, and you can possess up to 5 pounds per person. We also have a unique situation in the sense that we have native territories that already have signaled that they will be selling marijuana without those taxes. So how do you suppose the revenue to generate all these wonderful programs you're talking about is going to be impacted by the fact that nobody can tell the difference between legal marijuana and illegal marijuana? You can have a home with 4 people who age 21 who have 20 pounds of marijuana illegally in their possession at any given time. And we have a significant amount of native territory in New York State that will sell it without the taxes. I can tell you because I represent those territories. I see how far people drive to save $5 on a tank of gas. I can't imagine how far they're driving to save $50 on a bag of weed. Yeah. So how are we going to actually encourage real revenue?
No, absolutely. I'll speak to the home cultivation piece first. This state, as every other state who's passed a adult use measure, has allowed a limited home cultivation. Now, home cultivation will not start in the state of New York. It's not allowed. It's not legal yet, and won't be for some time. In that time, we are given an opportunity to stand up the market. Now, the best way, and from what I've seen in traveling and working on this issue across the country, is by making sure that we create and prioritize a couple of different things for our consumers and patients. One is making sure that they have access to the product, making sure that we have dispensaries and businesses that they can frequent geographically diverse regions across the state. 2 is making sure that there's a wide array of products for them to choose from. Now, if you're talking about trying to convert folks away from the illicit market, it's access, it's variety, and it's price, right? And so those are 3 things that we're going to be able to work on in the office, and subject to the rules that are created by the board. But on terms of the revenue estimates and overshooting and undershooting, just to comment on that as well, California is a very different market than New York. When California legalized medical in 1906, there were no rules, there was no regulations. California just passed regulations in 2014 in anticipation of adult use coming in 2016. So they were trying to work backwards from where we are moving forward. We have an inherently limited market right now, where we only have 10 operators in the state, and even though I have been one of the people advocating to expand that, and I know so does Vito as well, it's actually given us an opportunity to have a lot more control about how the market develops. And so I think that, California is probably a bad example in terms of comparison. A state like Maryland might be better, where they also have a limited, bigger than ours, but a limited medical market that is, doing very well for the state financially, and has very limited diversion. And so, again, similarly, starting small and growing in a way that the state is responsive to, I think it'll be a good way to make sure that we're keeping all of that revenue, not allowing more diversion into the illicit market.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question and a comment.
Senator Skoufis has handled it first. Can I defer to Senator Cedeno? Is that all right?
Sure.
Thank you.
So comment first, of course. I think Chris is brilliant. So that's my favorite, adjective for him. Your depth and breadth of experience in this area is amazing, and I think you're an absolutely perfect pick for this job. You have so much experience and so much knowledge around this area, and so I'm really excited about your selection to be the executive director, because you really do understand the complications that other states have faced. So I want to ask you, there's going to be so many things that you guys are going to have to deal with, but one of the challenges that many other states have dealt with is how do they deal with the complications of an existing illegal market that they've had a hard time getting rid of. How do we do that here in New York? Because right now, we've always been up against an incredibly sophisticated illegal marketplace. People aren't going in a back alley to buy, a bag of weed anymore. That's not how it works. We all know that. It's very sophisticated. People can order on their phone. You have weed maps. If those of you who don't know that. By the way, I don't even smoke marijuana. But, it gets delivered to your house. There's almost no real stigma associated with it. And so how do we convert people in New York State who right now are very comfortable with the model that they have to be able to go into a dispensary where they have to maybe share their information with the dispensary and maybe risk being, exposed to their neighbors and their boss, right? So how do we do that successfully and really crack into the illegal marketplace?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be a challenge. The illicit market in New York and elsewhere, California as well, is growing. It's not stopping. And what I think, too, is also important about this day is that so much of the operation has now been able to be conducted in what the gray space that exists without the information that is provided. So I want to echo the sentiments of the nominee for chair and the importance of getting education out there to make sure that both the public understand what is legal and what is not legal, and these existing entrepreneurs have the information necessary to understand that you're going to have to transition into the adult use market that we've set up. Because any product that's on the streets that's not tested and taxed is going to be illicit cannabis, and there still will be existing penalties for that. So I think, it's a robust public education process. It's the 3 points I mentioned earlier about pricing and availability, and it's also making sure that, compliance is going to be strong, which I think is going to be central as well.
And I think 2 other points. We've all seen, if you're in Manhattan, everyone has seen that weed truck that drives around, Times Square, and it has a store. That store is licensed by New York City's Consumer Affairs. They claim to sell marijuana. Now, I don't know what they're selling out of that store, but that's not an anomaly. You see businesses operating like that. We saw it a few years ago with CBD. They claim to be CBD oil. There's got to be a role for the Office of Cannabis Management to work with localities to crack down on that type of operation. And I hope that this is something that your office and the board will do. Because we cannot have this gray area marketplace out there that is operating. And I hope that that's something that you guys are going to look at as well. If we're going to have a legal regulated market, we need to have a legal regulated market, and the localities have to participate in that. And the final point is, we know that in the bill, there was language to allow localities to opt out. I was always opposed to that because I think what will happen is what we saw happen in Colorado, where you had whole areas opt out, and then you had marijuana, neighborhoods, and then you had areas where you had none. So I hope part of the education process is going out there to talk to localities about why they shouldn't opt out and how they should be willing to allow either it doesn't have to be a dispensary, it doesn't have to be a cultivation center. There's more than one way to be engaged in the marijuana industry in New York State. To close the door to it means you're closing the door to industry. It doesn't have to just be the plant and the product of the sale. So good luck. I'm thrilled about your nomination. I think you're going to do great things for the state, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much.
Senator Skoufis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations, Chris. Nice to see you. And your Senator Sabino's point, your expertise is obvious here. I do want to ask the same question, or one of the same questions that I asked the previous nominee, which is, look, when I go home, by far and away, the most common question I get about marijuana is, when is it going to be made available? And I'm curious as to what you envision that timeline to be. And the regs, the previous nominee mentioned maybe 3 months-ish. More importantly, I'm curious as to when people will be able to access legal marijuana. And so if you can opine on that, that's helpful.
Well, I mean, we're definitely excited that the governor has prioritized rolling this out. We have a 6-month delay. We're behind 6 months already. And so, the priority, she's been very clear that she wants to get this going. And the team who's been working on this issue from the executive staff have tried to line up things as much as possible so that we can move forward. And so I have no timeline, Senator, but what I can tell you is that we're as eager as you to get this thing started because we have goals that we really want to meet.
Thank you.
Thank you. And because you didn't answer this, because it wasn't posed as a question, I need to just clarify for the record. When Senator Borrello, you kept talking about having 5 pounds of homegrown. I just want to clarify. The law is when homegrown is allowed, and it's not yet, it would be a maximum of 6 plants, only 3 mature at a time. And a plant is this giant stalky weed-like thing. The vast majority of the plant is not usable as a drug, only the flower part. So when we talked about 5 pounds for weight of plants, if a police officer was coming to evaluate how much plant you had there, not that it was 5 pounds of usable cannabis. So I just wanted to clarify, the home grow rules don't override the maximum 3 ounce rule, okay? Because, you might not agree with 3 ounces either, but it's very different than 5 pounds. And I think the vision people might have had was that somebody's walking around with 5 pounds of usable marijuana that they somehow magically got out of their 3 mature plants that they were growing. It doesn't really work that way.
With all due respect, I will argue that even if they are, there's really no penalty for that anyway. So that is an issue, I think. My point was that we're going to have a hard time generating revenue when you really have, it's very, very easy for someone to grow and possess marijuana, and there's no way to tell legal marijuana from illegal marijuana. I'm just concerned about the revenue because we're staking a lot on generating revenue, and historically, as Diane pointed out, California is already subsidizing their industry. So if we have the opportunity to learn from the mistakes of others, and I hope we can maybe start to do that.
I hope so too. Anyone else? Oh, hello, Senator Bailey, and then Senator Lieutenant Governor.
I will save my poetic waxings for the floor, but I just wanted to make sure to say for the record, there could be no better selection by our new governor than Chris Alexander for this position. You got a wealth of information. You have been able to walk us members through, build details on in this subject matter area, which is rather complicated once you get in the weeds, no pun intended. I really didn't intend that, but it works out. But in all seriousness, I'm grateful to the executive for putting your name forward because you've shown on multiple levels that you're not only capable, but you're desirous of doing this work. So I just wanted to make that comment, and I'll say more on the floor. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to share. Congratulations.
Thank you, Senator. And I jumped over Senator O'Mara, so I'll go to Senator O'Mara.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Again, I just want to point out for the record that this is another nomination we received just prior to midnight last night. And we received a 1-page nomination form and a 1-page resume. So I guess I have the same questions for you, Mr. Alexander. How long have you been in discussions with the executive and or her staff regarding taking this appointment?
And we received the call just yesterday.
Yesterday. There had no discussions prior to that.
Questions over time, but we just received the call yesterday.
Did they tell you how much you're going to get paid?
No, just that it's subject to approval by the legislature.
Okay. Now you're employed now with a marijuana company, and just prior to this meeting, we received a 5-page recusal agreement that I believe indicates that you're leaving your employment.
Have left.
You left. Any guarantees to you that you're going to make as much or more than you did at your job you just left?
No guarantees made, and I assume that it'll be very different than where.
It just strikes me as odd that both you and Ms. Wright are jumping into positions that you don't know what the pay is going to be, And my understanding that the rough budget for this Office of Cannabis Management is somewhere around $46 million. And it's an enterprise that is supposed to oversee and generate over $300 million in taxes. That's quite a large operation. And I think that's going to take an incredible amount of effort and time on your part, particularly as the executive director, to manage that. How do you accept that position, not knowing what you're going to get paid?
Well, Senator, to be as frank as possible, I've been working on this thing for a long time. This has been a passion, starting from working on the stop and frisk arrests and fighting to get those records expunged. The work that we were able to do here, this has been something I've been committed to for a long time. So honestly, I didn't have that information, but I still jumped at the opportunity to serve.
Okay. Can you explain or kind of describe your immediately prior employer, Ville LLC, aka Village, what their potential involvement is in the New York State marijuana market?
I'm not sure what they plan to do in the future. I'll have no interest. I have no interest in the company and what they do in the future. The recusal is on file already, and there was a payout of future compensation that was owed, and so there's no interest moving forward in that company. What I would say though about that company and the experience that I've had was that as one of the few black cannabis companies in the world, I imagine they would try to be interested in the New York State market. My recusal letter, the role as executive director is not interested or involved in selecting licensees. That is something that's subject to the chair and the board and whatever else they decide to deem that authority to. So I will have no role in that process whatsoever.
Won't you have a role in putting together packages of information for the board for their consideration for selection? And how will you handle that with Ville?
Not related to the recusal. I will have no involvement with the consideration of Village in any application process whatsoever.
Thank you.
Okay. And then, thank you, Senator Benjamin.
Sure. I want to align myself with the comments of Senator Bailey. You have an incredible background, track record. You provide me with a number of things when you used to work for us. So there's no doubt about your commitment to this and your competency. My question to you is tied to the fact that I appreciate the fact that you have private sector experience in this space and public sector experience in this space, because you know on both sides of the coin what we're dealing with here. And so one of the things that I would be very interested in knowing is, what are some of the key things that you've learned from Village that you think will be critical in making sure that we have a successful cannabis program here in New York State?
I appreciate that, Senator. Senator, Lieutenant Governor. One of the things that we've seen, and from my previous experience, that actually varies from state to state, is the level of communication between the agency and the applicant, the licensee, the level of communication, level of transparency on what the intent or the expectations of the state are. I think I want to point to Missouri as a great example of, they have a very limited medical program as well, and they've been super communicative about what the expectations are from licensees there, where the company I worked for, Village, was licensed. They're communicative, and obviously this licensing process was going on during the pandemic. They're checking in on a regular basis. What is the status? What are the things that you all need to get going? We need you to start rolling. And having that level of engagement to make sure that businesses are coming up and are going to be able to serve the population. This is a medical state, so the patient population was something that I thought was just incredibly helpful. And it really kind of motivated you to make sure that you're communicating back, which I think is going to be an important thing here for OCM as well. So that was something, it's just something small, but I think it made a huge difference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did I skip over anyone else who has any questions? Okay. Then I'm going to ask you to excuse yourself. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Rivera.
I'll just say really quickly that I did really have a chance to work with you when you were working with us. Damn, you're impressive. Impressive group. So that's it.
And he doesn't like anyone. Thank you, Chris. I know you're gonna get me later for that one.
He doesn't like you.
Senator, thank you for being here. John, Lou, did you have a question before Chris left or after Chris left?
Move the nomination.
Second.
All right, John Lou moves the nomination. Senator Thomas seconds. I think everyone on this side of the room seconds. May I ask, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Is that a party no? Gee, you guys don't like anyone either. I apologize. I'm professional. This is just my bizarre sense of humor. I believe we have enough votes to move the nominees forward. With that, we've completed the business of the Finance Committee today.